Hello, and welcome to today's video. Yesterday I had to cut festivities short because my son woke up. I had to quickly go and grab him. So I will pick up from where I left off, and I was going down a bit of a rabbit hole, admittedly. So before I sort of go into today, I'll just recap and finish the point I was trying to make. And I was talking about the I was trying to illustrate how even we in our normal speaking, in our normal choice of words to articulate ourselves, we make certain decisions, we pick certain words, and if we're to say write those down, and upon rereading, reviewing, we decide it no longer conveys or it fails to convey what we want to say, we are within our rights to delete it and to remove it. And that never comes across or never feels like anything brutal or mean or evil, because we recognize we are the author of those words, and in being their author, we reserve the right to remove those words, to delete those words. Now, the jump from us and our words, us and our creation, to God and His creation actually isn't that far a jump. We tend to, and the point I was getting at was how when Moses instructed the Levites to go through and kill, the brothers that were worshiping other gods, that when God instructs the destruction of man, it offends our sensibilities because we consider ourselves erroneously on par with who God is. We consider ourselves His peer, and thus His destruction of man we consider an offense, because we would not endorse the destruction of other men by men, except we are not God's peer. Like, the reality of it is, we are God's creation in the same way as the words on the page are your creation. Now, the difference in words and us isn't anything to do with us or the words, it's to do with the nature of our creator or the nature of the creator. We create words, right? God creates us. But that gulf in the difference between our creation and God's creation lies in the fact that He is God and we are nowhere near His peer. And so the question that I really like that demonstrate this is, if God orders the destruction of man, is that murder? Is that murder? And I think, if objectively speaking, if we are to accept that man is God's creation, then no, it's not. In the same way as if there's an earthquake or a landslide or an avalanche and nature destroys man, we recognize nature's power. We recognize the brutality of nature. Even if a lion is to kill a man, we recognize, yes, the lion is stronger. We would mourn, of course, because we've lost the man, and it's death, yeah. But we don't call the lion evil for doing what it can. We don't call nature evil for doing what it can. We only tend to try and call God evil because we consider ourselves somehow on His level. And I think that comes down to recognizing the nature of our relationship. Again, we are watching God's interaction with people. And thus far, we've seen a God that is kind and merciful and gracious. You know, um, I don't think I even talked about this at the time, but kicking Adam and Eve out of the garden so that they do not remain in their sin. So now Adam and Eve are like us, lest they eat the fruit of life and remain like us, remain in their state. If they had eaten the fruit of life, which seemingly provided immortality, or sort of froze a certain point, and remained as such for immortality, for eternity, then they would have never had the opportunity to revert back to, being holy. So God kicks them out. And in kicking them out, gave them more suitable clothes that would keep them. Um, the sorry, my son is moving, and I'm sort of seeing if he's gonna wake up. Um, yeah, choosing Abraham, showing Abraham all the blessings, Isaac, Jacob, seeking to have in relationships with them, Joseph, ultimately, coming down and um, freeing Israel from the tyranny of Egypt. Like, God so far is seeking to have this relationship with his creation, um, such that all of his creations might know who he is, right? And we're seeing a gracious, we're seeing a good, we're seeing a kind God. But I think we also need to recognize we're seeing a God that created the universe. This is how powerful he is. A God that spoke these things into being. We see with the story of Job, especially, a God that, you know, even Job himself, who by all standards was the victim of, this plot by the enemy. God didn't acquiesce to Job's complaints. Instead, God asked him, okay, cool. Where were you when I created this? Where were you when I defined the boundaries of the sea? Where were you when I, created the Leviathan? Um, uh, or these wondrous animals that are described, and Job himself repents, right? So Job himself, who was the victim of it, like, let's take our sensibilities and put that to the side. The story gives an account of Job, and he, up until the point where he meets God, makes a strong claim. He makes a super strong claim. When he meets God, he repents, right? So we can't then tell him he's wrong, right? We have to recognize what that means, and that means God is powerful and of such great and enormous might that we shouldn't be ignoring that. Now, all that to say, when God chooses to instruct for the destruction of those 3,000 people, it is a tragic thing, but it is a thing that God, if He is God, is well within His rights to command, and He does. And the Bible accounts for it. So, in as much as it's a brutal thing and it's a painful thing, it's a thing that God commanded, and therefore it can't be wrong. It isn't wrong, because those 3,000 people had gone against the covenant that they were in with God. And we've got to also remember, this is a covenant, right? God had entered into a covenant with the people. They were, they had promised to do everything that he said, you know, um, and they knew, he'd fed them, he'd kept them, he'd brought them out of slavery. As I said, I don't imagine if one family just said, I'm going back to Egypt and left. I don't think that they would have died. They would have been cut off from their people. Um, but they knew that there was a reason that they wanted to be with God. Um, and so we come into this, right, and I think it's worth recognizing that God is God. They're not His peers, and it's a mercy and a grace that He just doesn't choose to wipe us out, considering what we do and what we've become. Instead, he chose to send Christ, and through Christ we can be reconciled and all our sins forgiven. Anyway, let's go into today's reading. So today's reading is Exodus 33 to 35. Share my screen so you guys can see it again. Blue Letter Bible. It's there. It's free. Please jump on it. And so, my God is this terrible thing has happened where Israel's made a golden calf and worshipped, and the 3,000 people have died. But God is just like, I'm done with these people. If I carry on with you guys, I will destroy you because you are stubborn and you are stiff necked people. Cool. Moses is interceding. He's interceded on the behalf of the people, and Moses is, God has even come to the point of saying, all right, I'll send you to the promised land, which I've promised to your ancestors, but I'm not going to go with you. I won't go with you. And Moses is now sort of interceding and asking, that no, God, if you don't go with us, then there's no point in us going, you know. And Moses is sort of trading on his relationship with God, his friendship with God, to make some of this assertion that God goes with them. And in that we see this interesting thing of, Moses is sort of seeking some sort of assurance. It's like, okay, cool. God, you say I'm your friend. You look favorably on me. Then show me your glory. And God does this incredible thing of hiding him in rock, walking by, so that he might see God's glory as it passes. Because none of us, no one in human form, can see God's face and carry on, because we can't, in our fallen state, we just can't. I imagine when we see Christ and we're made like Christ, we might be able to eventually, but at least now, even Moses couldn't. So God does, and then God tells Moses to, all right, cool, let's replace the tablets that you smashed. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai and does the same. He takes these tablets and God starts writing on them, and again, you know, establishes the terms of the covenant that he has with them. He gives them some festivals, gives them their laws. He tells them specifically, and this bit I want to highlight, he must not make a treaty of any kind with the people living in the land. They lust after their gods, offering sacrifices to them. They will invite you to join them in their sacrificial meals, and you will go with them. Then you accept their daughters, who sacrifice other gods as wives for your sons, and they will seduce your sons to commit adultery against me by worshipping other gods. Now, this line here, you must not make a treaty of any kind with the people living in the land. Later, we're going to see one of our boys fail to do this. That's by the side. What I want you to pay attention to is the language that's used here. And they will seduce your sons to commit adultery against me by worshipping other gods. The relationship God is seeking with his people isn't just one of sacrifice or pay an offering and then I'm good. It's not just one um of sort of blind duty. He's using a word like adultery. If you go and worship another god, you are committing adultery against me. And so we start to see why his reaction is the way it is. Even our current courts of law, right? And don't quote me on this, I'm not a lawyer, but I fully believe, and this might just be sort of, watching shows, getting this idea, but they have a sense of, crime of passion, where if, for instance, a man is walking on his wife with another, man, and he strikes the man in his anger, he wouldn't even be, and say the man even dies, he wouldn't be convicted of just first degree murder. it would be a crime of passion. He'd be described as being in a state of temporary insanity, seeing this betrayal and acting as such. And that will temper the judgment. So even we understand, it's common. I imagine you'd understand, that level of betrayal, anger, rage, reaction, um, because of the nature of that relationship, the man and the wife, right? The nature of the love that's there, the commitment to one another, that such a betrayal causes so much pain. And God's using similar language here, right? To go and worship another God isn't just to change teams. It's committing adultery to him. It's so terrifying to God, for lack of a better word, because obviously God's not scared of anything. But it's so significant to God, maybe I should say. He doesn't even want you to sort of start making relationships with these people who he's waited effectively 400, more than 400, because this was told to Abraham, right? But he's waited hundreds of years for their sins um to build up to the point where it warrants their destruction, right? These aren't necessarily good people. These are people who sacrifice their children to their gods. These are people who, Asherah poles I mentioned, and these are sort of pagan gods. This like sexual, just silliness going on. You think of the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, that sort of attitude. And so God is like, look, don't even start to form relationships with these guys, because they will seduce you away from me, you know. And it's I think we take for granted that the covenant they went into with God was effectively a marriage, and to walk away from it is a betrayal of the highest order, you know. And so God tells them, these things, and starts writing this on the tablets. And 35 is effectively God getting all of the people that uh yeah, all the people to um offer the stuff that they need for the build of the tabernacle, the linen, the gold, the wood, and God moves people's hearts to do it, and people bring willingly. Now it's interesting because it doesn't say everyone brought, so there were people that maybe didn't have, people that didn't feel like giving. Sorry, and I don't think any of them were punished for it. At least it's not recorded as such. But all whose hearts were stirred brought the things that were needed, and Bezalel and Ohio something that was his, or Oholiab, who was his assistant, um, came together and sort of instructed for the building of this tabernacle. And it's yeah, that's the sort of where we end. So I think if there's anything to take away from today and yesterday, it's that we are not God's peers. We are his creations. And that is not something to be taken lightly. Um and the people of Israel, when they went into this covenant with God, despite being his creations, entered into a level that put them, you know, on par with it, like a wife with a spouse, and so when we see their transgressions and we see their misgivings, it's not just, as I said, changing teams. It's it's um it's adultery. It's a betrayal. It's pain, and God responds as such. So that's today's readings, and let's look at what tomorrow will be. Tomorrow is 36 to 38. So feel free to give that a read. And yeah, Thank you so much for watching this. If you do, whenever you do, I hope it encourages you to pick up the word and give it a read. God willing, tomorrow we'll be here and we'll keep reading. And to that end, I wish you a good rest of your day. God willing, see you tomorrow. Peace out.